Welcome everyone to the American Rescue Plan, American Indian Resilience and Education, or ARP-AIRE grant program talking circle. As I move through these opening slides, please say hello in the chat box. Let us know your project name, your role, and where you're located. I know we have a few new faces here today, so we're glad to have everybody on. I'm going to go ahead and get started with our standard disclaimer.
This presentation was produced under U.S. Department of Education contract number GS00F115CA with Synergy Enterprises, Inc. The views expressed herein do not necessarily represent the positions or policies of the U.S. Department of Education. No official endorsement by the U.S. Department of Education of any product, commodity, service, or enterprise mentioned herein is intended or should be inferred.
All right, excellent. Now that we've got our standard disclaimer out of the way, I see some hellos coming into the chat box. So good to see you all from all across the country here. Glad to have you all here. On the screen now, you see our agenda for today's talking circle. So this is our first talking circle since you all turned in your annual performance reports, or APRs. So they've given us some great insight into the status of your programs, and a few things have bubbled up for us to discuss. So everybody was invited to bring a copy of your APR to today's talking circle. We'll be sharing some feedback and providing a little bit of time for you to look back at that document or documents to see what you actually submitted and then compare it with some of the guidance that we're going to be sharing. So if you don't have that handy now, might be a good time while we're getting ramped up here to grab that and have that handy so you can look back at that as we move through the first part of our talking circle today. We have a few reporting and budget items that we want to make sure are on your radar, and then we're going to spend some time discussing and sharing issues related to your program activities and services. So yeah, we want to talk about, our ARP-AIRE program as this one-time opportunity of this grant program to invest in your community. And so we've made some space today to discuss those challenges and really help to share and lift each other up, and maybe share some ideas about how you've been able to address or move past some of those challenges. So before we part ways, we'll share several upcoming events. We're going to ask your feedback, and as we always do during a very brief in-session poll, and then we will close out with some reminders and about some upcoming events. All right. So before we dive into all of that, though, I do want to address that some of you may have heard the news or received the notice that your previous program officer, Shala Ortega at the Office of Indian Education, has retired. So we wish her well in her new life chapter. So you want to be sure to update your contact information and make note of who you should be reaching out to regarding your ARP-AIRE grant program. And we'll make sure to share those emails and at the end of today's session. But I am pleased to welcome your new interim program officer, Ms. Bianca Williams, who is here to support us today and respond to any questions. Welcome, Bianca.
Thank you, Tracy. Yes, hello everyone. I'm so happy that I can be here and assist with your needs as needed until we hire someone full-time. But I definitely want to get to know you guys all on a one-on-one basis and find out a lot about your programs. Currently, right now, we're in the process of reviewing all those APRs, and I know each one of you are working with our one-on-one coaching, and next month I will definitely be reaching out a little bit more just to get follow-up information and more feedback if needed from any of the APR reports. So you definitely can reach out to me if you need budget revisions done. I'm the person that you'll be sending them to. If you have questions and concerns, I'm a good source along with our TA team that's been helping you guys out a lot. But I know that this is a whole new program and we're still in the learning phase and getting things off the ground. I know a lot of you have got things off the ground, and I'm really looking forward to learning from those successes and challenges. I do find it really important that we can come together as much as we can, either on our talking circle sessions or on our office hours. You guys are in the field, so even though I'm your support here in DC, you guys are the experts. So, you know, we can learn from each other, we can work together. So I really appreciate such a good turnout for today's meeting. And I'm really excited to hear about all the great work that you all are doing. Thank you.
Thank you. So glad to have you here today. All right. Well, let's go ahead and share some of that feedback from those annual performance reports, or APRs. First, let's kick it off with a few accolades and cheers to this group. Some well-deserved cheers for completing your APRs on time. Yes, big round of applause. That is really helpful to everybody who has to review those. Not only on time, but also submitted successfully through G5. And those of you who have worked with G5 are well acquainted with those quirks. So thank you for navigating that and getting that all submitted on time. We also noted that everyone in this group of grantees included an executive summary. Those are much appreciated, so thank you. And many of you also included those unique project measures in that section A explanation of progress section, those unique project measures. Remember, there's two types of project measures that you have. One is GEPRA related, that is required by the Department of Education, and then the others are created by you based on your unique project and your approved proposed application. So we were really interested in reading those, and thank you for taking the time to and investing your energies into developing those project measures. So good work. I know it's no small task to get those developed and turned in on time. Since we did spend so much time looking at those, we also wanted to point out and lift up a few areas of growth. So now that we've celebrated, we want to help clarify maybe a few details that you can be thinking about in your APR updates that will be coming due this fall, as well as future APRs, so that your reports will be even better next time around. So now, if you don't already have your APR documents handy, this is where it's gonna be helpful to be able to look back at those, or at least try to remember what the information that was submitted. So we're going to talk through three sections. Section A, we'll go over explanations of progress and the need for some specific details that we're looking for in that section. We'll look at section B, reporting, which is around the budget. Specifically there, we're going to talk about the narrative and the way the optional budget reporting tool can help you. And then we'll also touch on section C and clarifying what Office of Indian Ed would like to see in that section. Okay. So starting with section A, in quite a number of the APRs, we saw really in some areas, a lack of robust explanations of progress in section A. Remember, this is the section where you really get to tell in some detail about the progress that you're making towards those specific objectives. And so there's some specific aspects of your data collection that we would like to have some details about. So on the screen there are some of those specific details that we would like to see included in that narrative piece, in that qualitative section of your section A. This is where you are writing about the steps that you've taken to make substantial progress towards goals or measures, and really describe those data collection activities and tools that you're using. So those items that are listed out on the screen right now are also listed in the APR reporting checklist that we provided during that APR webinar. So that's a really handy list to have when you're creating your, developing your APR and working on your section A. So let's just go over these briefly now. For every project measure that you've defined in this first APR, right? OIE wants to know which data are collected and why. Tell us why and how those data that are being collected inform that specific measure. Give us the start and end dates of the data collection period. We'd like to know about the data collection procedures. So you can use that narrative section in section A to explain the processes or the methods that you use to gather that data. And be sure to explain the way that you analyzed or evaluated that data for reporting. Remember, you want to keep in mind that the reader doesn't necessarily know all those details. And so you want to provide as much of that for the reader as possible. In that narrative explanation of progress, you should describe how you have met or made progress towards that measure. And if it's not met, provide an explanation and details about why and describe the steps that the program is making to make substantial progress towards that goal. So let's maybe take a couple of minutes to look back at your APR document, specifically that section A and the explanations of progress, that narrative or qualitative piece of section A. Maybe you have it on your screen electronically, so you might need to kind of flip back and forth, or maybe you have a hard copy of your APR that you're able to look at while this is on the screen. But just take a couple of minutes here while we're together now, and then compare sort of what was written with these list of details that we just reviewed. And we're gonna stay in the whole group, but this is an opportunity just to kind of look back on that, review and reflect on what details were included in your explanations of progress and what details might be missing. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to do that. And invite you, if you have any questions as you're looking at that, to come off mute and pose a question, or if you want to use the chat box, you can put a question in there as well. Yes, I see we have a comment in the chat box there from our other technical assistance team members. Those explanations of progress are really your opportunity to tell the story behind that quantitative data. So we have to report those ratios in the tables up above, but in this narrative piece, you really get to share your story and make sure that you provide the context about your project. And thank you, Olani. She has posted that checklist that was shared at that APR webinar. So that does contain the details that are on the screen right now. You can have that handy for future reporting and updates. So looking back at those APR documents, did you include information for this information for each of the project measures, or if something was missing, what might you need to include going forward? if you have any thoughts you want to share, be sure to take yourself off mute. Sometimes we forget that. I know when we're in Zoom.
Hello, this is Scott from the Karuk Tribe in California.
Hi, Scott.
Hi, I would like to share that this was my first time ever being a project manager, and also how small like the area was for the explanation. I probably was not as thorough and did not expand enough on all of these measures, like to explain in greater detail. So that was one of the faults that I made with this section.
Scott, that's a really good point. Thank you for being brave and being the first one to come off mute to share. I know that space is limited. So one tip that we often advise is that you can use that section C, where it's you have much more space. So you can always say in that section A, more detail provided in section C, and then you can label it in section C, continuation of explanation of progress. And I see Sarah's going to add to that.
Yeah, Sarah worked with me with this, and also like that where she really explained what section C allows you to just kind of, it's almost like a show off, or it's a further explanation or more detail to get your point across, and to you don't have to be as concise and to expand. So
Yeah, and that is a perfect tip. And my only other tip, just for explanations of progress, because the box is kind of small. And so sometimes when you're making your section A, we'll see folks who put like 4 or 5 measures on one page. And then you just have this one little tiny box and you're trying to explain 4 or 5 measures. Don't feel like you have to put that many on one page. You can put just 1 or even 2 on a page, and then that gives you that whole box to dedicate to just one measure's explanation of progress, and then you can make a new page for the next one. So that's another way that you can up the amount of space that you have available, and then take it over to that section C for that additional info.
thank you.
Great tip. Thank you, Sarah. Other thoughts, or did any questions come up for you as we just reviewed these items? Okay, well, feel free to continue to post in the chat box, and I'm going to go ahead and move on to our some reflections on section B, or the budget area. So some of you chose to use the optional budget reporting tool, and you see a screenshot of that up on the screen right now. But several budget reports were still incomplete because they really lacked the text that is asked for in the 2 narrative columns of the tool, or they lacked a separate budget narrative really detailing the budget activity for each of the categories. So really we like to promote the optional budget reporting tool because it really is the best way to ensure that all of the required information is included in your APR. So that's why we really recommended and emphasize that in the APR webinar, and doing that again here today. So we just want to remind everybody to be sure to complete each column of where you are entering in amounts or dollar amounts. It's also really helpful that if that dollar amount in those columns of, say, like, available funds, or funds drawn down, or expenditures not yet drawn down, if it's 0, go ahead and put that 0 in there so that we know that you've looked at that column. There's some information entered and it wasn't just skipped. So we reminded you about the narrative columns, that we definitely need, you know, some text in there. But that tool and those narrative columns don't replace the need for a budget narrative. So reviewers are looking for both a budget narrative and a brief sentence or two in those narrative columns there. So you want to make sure that those are filled out as well. Yeah, those columns there. Okay, so once again, kind of looking back at your APRs, we have those handy. It's around section B. If you use the optional reporting tool, did those narrative columns get filled in? Is there another budget narrative included beyond the tool? Sometimes we see those submitted in section C because of the space allowed there, and that's fine. But as you look at the budget narrative in your APR, what questions do you have maybe about the tool or what's needed in the narrative? Any questions about that?
Yeah, I'd like to know, I guess just a little bit more explanation of what's needed in the narrative, or like a recommendation, I guess, for that space. Like, is there a certain wording to use there for that space, or would it just be better to use that optional the other form or something to submit on that part, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, are you asking about what we're looking for in the tool and the narrative separate from this?
Yeah, I guess in the tool, more in the tool, like what is acceptable to put there, and do we just need to elaborate more on the narrative with that?
Yeah, so I can kind of jump in here. So there's two different things we're looking for here. When you look at that blue arrow where it says rationale for available funds, there are two different things that are being looked for there. One is, why do you have your available funds left? So when you look at that available funds column, if you have $100,000 left in personnel, why do you have that amount left? Is it because of some late hires, or are you on track with your spending? The second thing we're looking for there is then, how do you plan on spending that available balance down by the end of your grant year? So if you have maybe a good bit left in supplies, how do you plan on spending that by the end of your grant year? And really detailing out what that's going to be used for. So those are the two things we're looking for in that rationale for available funds. And remember, that section will expand. So you don't have to feel limited. You can keep typing and it will accept as much as you need to put there. Then when you go over to the green arrow column where it says intended use of the remaining carryover funds, if you have indicated that you're going to have any carryover, then you need something in this column. So basically, when you look at your column right before that says amount estimated remaining at end of year, that's estimating your carryover. If you're going to have money remaining at the end of the year, we want you to be transparent about that, but we need to know what's your plan for it. The plan can't be, I'm going to figure it out, or we're going to spend it. It needs to be more specific, because when you just put like, we're going to figure it out, that doesn't necessarily invoke the most confidence that there's going to be a way for this to be appropriately spent. And your program officers are looking at that to determine your continuation award. So you want to really explain, okay, yes, we had some late hires this year, so we have some additional money in personnel. But next year, we're going to use that money to do XYZ. Now, remember, it always has to be within the scope of your project. So you want to make sure that you're staying within what you kind of said you were going to do, but maybe you do need some additional supplies. Maybe you need additional staffing support. Maybe you're going to be able to serve more students than you thought because now you have a little additional funds. So it's really just explaining what you're going to do with that money you have left over at the end of the grant year. So for everybody right now, That would be the year one funds that you're anticipating you're going to have left at the end of the year as you move into year two. Because while we do want you to make every effort to expend down your funds by the end of the grant year, if you know that you're not going to be able to do that, we want you to be transparent about it and be really clear on your plan for those monies. Does
Okay,
that
so my
help?
next question, yes, it helps tremendously. But I guess my question is, okay, so let's use your example. If there was 100,000 left in personnel, and because of late hires, and then we put that in there, does it need to be expressed further in the narrative? Like that, would that suffice for an answer, or does it need to be elaborated more within the narrative?
So it does suffice as far as why you have it remaining. What would need to be added further is, what are you going to do with that money? So in the blue column, you'd be explaining, okay, so since we have this available balance there, what are we going to do with it? How are we going to try to spend it down by the end of this current grant year? And in the green column, however much you think you're not going to spend down by the end of the year, what are you going to do with that? So maybe you think I can spend down about 30,000 of it by the end of the year on XYZ. And then the remaining 70,000 that I think I can't spend down and we'll have to use this carryover, I'm going to plan to use for ABC. So it's fine to say that
Okay, and
the
if we
reason is
wrote it
late
in the
hires,
tool,
just make sure and put the plan.
okay, so if we put that in the tool and it fit, that would be fine.
Yes.
Okay. And I guess my last question, so sorry, is saving it and sending it via PDF. Like I had a problem with that because of the space. Like I can write in there as much, but whenever I save it, it's not viewable.
Cutting it off.
Everything. Yeah. So
So typically, if you go down and double click the lower border of the cell, it should fully expand it so that then when you save to PDF, it keeps your full explanation. If it's not cooperating, if you're having trouble, always feel free to reach out and we can help with those kind of weird, like saving formatting issues.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Great then.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And my last tip for whether you're doing your budget reporting or your budget revision, but particularly those of you who are working on budget revisions, because I know that's a lot of you, is also to remember and look back again at the scope of your project. Make sure that your plans for these funds are within the scope of your project and are clearly aligned with the goals and objectives of your project. And that'll usually point you in the right direction of having things in an approvable format.
Thank you, Amber, for those questions, and Sarah for the comments. It's actually a nice segue. I see Nancy has posted a question in the chat box too. I think she's having some audio trouble, but she said, I had a very hard time getting projects off the ground and will have carryover. However, one of my performance measures objectives may need to change. Would I be able to adjust the funding in the budget to reflect the new objective?
So Nancy, my suggestion would be let's schedule some time to talk specifically about your situation. Typically, you're not able to change your performance measures, objectives after grant award and particularly after your first APR. So probably our best bet would be to kind of chat about your specific situation separately and figure out the best way to handle that. I know you were working to schedule your ARP-AIRE coaching session, so we can actually talk about it then if you'd like. And I know you don't have audio, so I'll give you a chance to kind of pop back into the chat.
Yeah, thank you for lifting that up, Nancy. And before I go on to the next section, do we have any other questions about the budget or what we're asking to be reported or how? Make sure no one's raising a hand. Okay. Okay, very good. Well, I'm going to go ahead and go on then to section C. So one of the tools that we also provided at that APR webinar this spring was an optional Section C reporting tool. So we developed this Section C tool in collaboration with the Office of Indian Ed, really to help put some structure around this section and ensure that all the reports included the details that are really necessary for program officers to determine whether substantial progress is being made, to provide that context and background information as well. So if you did not complete the Section C tool, we strongly urge you to include those with your APR updates, which will be happening this fall, and we'll provide some more detail about that. And include that in your reports. So one more time today now, I'd like you to look back at the APR documents that you submitted, and particularly around Section C of your APR. If you did not include this tool, and on the screen you see that first page of information that was asked for in the tool, did you include the information that was listed? And as you look at the information that's required in this optional Section C reporting tool, what questions do you have? Is there anything in that tool that is unclear? And I see Alani's already got that tool posted in the chat box. So if you want to click that little blue arrow and download that, you can have a copy of that handy as well. But on the screen, you do see those questions and details and bits of information that are asked for in the tool. So this may have been your first time submitting APRs. It may have been your first time with this new tool that we offered up. Any questions about that? So again, we really encourage the use of the optional Section C reporting tool, and including that in your annual performance reports. Again, feel free, if you're looking at that while we move through the next few slides, if you have any questions, happy to try to answer those for you. We do want to lift up a few reminders for you about reporting. I've mentioned a couple of times now that you will be providing annual performance report updates. Here is a due date for you. Those will be due on December 8th. Those APR updates will be emailed to oie@seiservices.com, and we'll make sure that folks get a copy of these slides after today, so you will have this information as well. You'll also be able to revisit the recording of our talking circle, always on the YouTube technical assistance channel that we provide you. So we wanted to go over the APR feedback because you'll be submitting these APR updates in the fall. Remember, if you reported 999 for any of your measures, that means that you did not have the data at the time that APR was due in the spring, but you will have the data before the end of the grant year. So we do have a required reporting form that is Section A. So all of the information that we just shared with you about section A is good to keep in mind. You'll want to complete the target and actual ratios for any measures that you previously entered 999 into. Okay, and then you'll also provide an updated narrative for the explanations of progress that was on what has occurred from that June 6th date when those APRs were due through December 8th when those updates are then due. Okay. Again, we strongly encourage you to include that Section C reporting tool when you submit your updates in December. Might be a good idea just to go ahead and mark your calendar with that due date and maybe back map a couple of benchmark dates so that you have time to set aside to work on that and get those prepared. And I do believe we have a document to support this reporting that will be due. The APR update form for section A that I was referring to. That's what will complete for those APR updates. So we've mentioned the Section C reporting tool. We didn't get a lot of questions here today yet, and maybe you're still looking that over and you have some. But we did field a number of questions along the way about a couple of items on there. So we wanted to take just a few minutes here today and help clarify maybe a few items that appear on that Section C reporting tool. So one of those items that maybe can be a little bit confusing that we hope to clarify for you is around the unique student number. It asks for the unique student number to be reported, that even if a student is receiving multiple services through your program, each student counts only once. So I have a bit of a graphic problem for you to solve here. So on the screen, we see a program with 2 different services. We have 3 students participating in after-school tutoring. We have 2 students participating in work-based learning. But this is, in each of these images of a student represents a student, so who is participating in that service. So the question is, how many unique students, do we see in this graphic problem? I was going to say word problem, but it's not really a word problem. Feel free to put your answer in the chat box or come off mute if you want to shout it out. How many unique students are participating in these 2 programs? I see 4, I see 2. So we've got a few people playing along. All right, the correct answer is 4. So you'll notice that we've got 3 in the after school and then 2 in the work-based learning program, but there's one icon there that's the same, that's meant to represent the same students. So I don't know, Susie with the pigtails participates both in after school tutoring as well as work-based learning. So the total count of unique students in this graphic problem is 4. You got that correct. All right, one more for those of you who prefer to have your word problems or in data format with tables and numbers. Same question here. If this was your data and you were reporting on the unique number of students, how many unique students are receiving services under this particular program, example program? 6, I see Amber wrote. She was very quick and she was very right. 6 unique students here. You see they're all participating in different combinations of those service programs, but really we're interested in knowing how many unique students are participating across all of those programs. Okay, That's one question we know that comes up. Another question that causes a lot of questions is around student eligibility and services. And a lot of these questions really boil down to what are local requirements versus a requirement to the grants, and what really constitute and what changes require OIE approval. So local requirements are really, you know, the local policies, practices, and procedures that stem from your organization, whether that's a local education agency, a district, or a school, or a tribal education agency, or perhaps your actual program practices or policies. They may have specific guidelines or practices that are really defined in your scope of work or in your administrative practices. On the other hand, grant requirements stem from the language that was put into the original notice inviting applicants, or your approved proposal, which essentially that approved proposal that that Department of Ed signed off on is essentially functions as your contract that specifies the ways that you're going to be using your awarded funds. So that approved proposal is what you've agreed to. And general rule of thumb is that anything that goes beyond that scope of the original proposal will require OIE approval. So we have another little activity to kind of help frame our thinking around this. I have several scenarios I'm going to put on the screen, and then your job is to tell us, you know, if this is a local decision or if the scenario is a change that requires OIE approval. All right, let's go here. All right, so the first scenario that we have here is that a partner district is requesting that we serve non-native youth in the high school. So feel free, if you want to come off mute and shout out an answer, or if you want to put something in the chat box. What is your response to this one? A partner district is requesting that we serve non-native youth in the high school. So you've got one vote for OIE. Gaween says Craig, no. Not allowed. You are not to be tricked, Craig. You're absolutely right. So the purpose of the ARP-AIRE grant is really specifically to support the unique needs of our Native American youth. And so therefore, underneath this grant, this would not be approved. It would not get approval. So it was a little bit of a trick question. I apologize for that, but you were not fooled. So no more trick questions, I promise. But a new scenario, here we go. A group of siblings spends the summer on the local reservation with their parent, and they want to participate in our summer program. Is that something that requires OIE approval? Is this a local decision? Amber is quick with her response, local. Julie says local as well. See, we're getting some consensus. Very good. Yes, that is a local decision. OIE does not have requirements regarding part-time residents. All right, let's do another one. This grantee is receiving requests for services from tribal citizens outside the area, the service area that was defined in the application. We are receiving requests for services from tribal citizens outside the service area defined in our application. So what do we have here? We're saying this is a local decision, or is this something that is required OIE approval? Roxanne says OIE approval. Yes. Steve, Luke, you are all correct. This is something that would require OIE approval. And really the key phrase to this scenario was defined in our proposal, right? So remember, anytime that you want to make changes that's different than something you originally proposed, you have to submit that request to OIE. All right, a couple more. In this scenario, we identified a need to expand language services to accommodate more students in the grades served and must reallocate funds from one contractor to another. Is this something that requires OIE approval, or is this a local decision? Expand language services to accommodate more students in the grades served. Got some votes for OIE. We've got some votes for local. Yeah, would anybody who put local care to share out why they said local?
I think because we're not using your funds to use it, we're using another program's funds, and we're allowed to add students to our funds as long as they're tribal members. That's my thought.
Okay. Okay. If this was all using ARP-AIRE funds, would it still be a local decision, or would that require OIE approval? And that's to anybody, not just you, Craig. Thank you.
If you already have language services and you're expanding by adding another grade, well, I think you're still all right. If you have language services as part of your grant, you should be okay.
Yeah, you're definitely getting at the subtleties there that we wanted to lift up. So in this scenario, we meant it to be that this is a service that was already defined and approved, that the grade levels were already included and defined in the proposal. And so really it's responding to a larger need than was probably anticipated in this example. And you're keeping the funds, this is key as well. The budget is staying within that category of contractual, and it's not moving to a different category. So even though you might be using a different contractor, it's still under that larger category contractual. So that's that is a local decision. All right, we've got one more. This scenario, the grantee wants to move budgeted funds from the staffing category to the contractual category in order to expand tutoring services to additional grades and therefore accommodate all requests for services. Is this one an OIE required approval, or is this a local decision? Yes, everybody is saying OIE, and you're absolutely right. And this scenario is actually a twofold example of changes that require OIE approval. First is the addition of the new grade levels, right? That was something that is going to require approval if it's beyond the scope of what was in the approved proposal. And then again, anytime that you're moving funds from one category to another, that constitutes a notable change or a significant change, and therefore requires OIE approval. Y'all did great. Any questions about some of that, or did this raise any questions for you as we work through those scenarios? All right, so just to wrap up, our objectives for that section here, we just want to lift up and summarize quickly that when you're considering any changes or activities or services and you want to determine whether you need OIE approval, you can ask yourself these questions. Is this something that's beyond what was written in the original approved proposal? Does the change have significant budget implications? Does the change entail a change in the key personnel? Okay, if the answer to any of those questions is yes, then you definitely need OIE approval before implementing that change. You cannot implement changes that impact your scope of work without OIE approval. So when you're submitting a request for those kinds of changes, you want to provide as many details as possible about that requested change. And you may need to submit a budget revision, really depending on the type of change being being requested. And as Sarah mentioned earlier, you know, we are here to help you. We are here to serve you. So if you have any questions about, can I do this change? Do I need approval? Please feel free to reach out to us. You see the email there. You can always reach somebody from the technical assistance team. They are always monitoring that email. And you also have the opportunity. Some of you have already done this, but it's still open to you. And we hope to be able to talk with everybody at some time for one-on-one support. You can schedule a session with your technical assistance team through that link, that coaching link as well. And I think that was posted a little bit earlier. So if you scroll up to the top of our discussion thread in the chat box, you'll be able to grab that link as well that Sarah posted. So thank you. All right, so here are some reminders now that we want to make sure are on your radar. This was your first go around with annual performance reporting for the ARP-AIRE grant. And while it's clear that there were some struggles about what was necessary, we are here to help you, both your technical assistance team as well as your program officer. We are here to help you, or somebody may have reached out to you if there was any information that was missing. Regarding the budgets, it's clear that that many programs are not yet implementing services and therefore not spending their funds. And so we reviewed several reports where there was actually very small amounts, or maybe even $0 drawn down from G5. And so I know we've had some conversations with some folks about this, but that really raises a flag for us because the drawdowns in G5 are one of those only metrics that the department has really that indicates that substantial progress is being made, that activities are being implemented. So we'll get to some program sharing here in a minute. And so I hope to really use that time so that you can share and talk with each other about those of you who have been able to move forward with implementation and are implementing services, to share what successes you've had, as well as some of you who may be struggling to get things up and running and off the ground. I know there's a lot of challenges in the field. We'll have some opportunities to talk about that here shortly. But most of you have indicated that there is some level of carryover that is anticipated. And so we do want to stress the importance of having that budget narrative and a quantifiable plan for carryover in your reports. So for the current grant year, we are currently in year one still. Budget revisions really can be submitted at any time as needed and required. We do ask that if you do have any final revisions for this current fiscal year, that ideally to submit those at least 30 days before the end of the fiscal grant year. Okay. That's for this current year. If you have budgets and budget revisions, and I heard Sarah say earlier, it sounds like a lot of you are working on those. In the new fiscal year, so the new fiscal year will begin November 29th of this year, and everybody will complete a budget revision for the new fiscal year. Here's another due date. That budget revision for the new fiscal year will be due January 12th, 2023. So there's a little bit of time. You may be dealing with this year's budget in the shorter term. And we may address this, the year two budget revisions at the next talking circle. So following the release of the new grant, the new GANs, every grantee will complete a budget revision with the actual awarded amounts plus any carryover from this current fiscal year. All right, and so when that time comes, we will make sure that you have that ARP-AIRE optional budget revision tool, and then you will submit that to OIE. Any questions about budgets? Let me check the chat box here. Yes, thank you, Alani. Just a reminder there in the chat box. If you have not already scheduled a coaching session, we ask that you get those on the books by Friday, August 18th. You don't have to have a coaching session by August 18th, just have one scheduled so that we know everybody's gotten in there by the end of this week. I know the team is looking forward to chatting with everyone. Okay. So let's shift gears just a bit now so that we can hear less of me talking and more of your sharing. We want to hear from those of you who have had some success with securing your data sharing agreements. I know we're kind of all over the map with this one, but I'd like to open up the floor now and invite anyone who has had some success with these data sharing agreements and moving them forward. What tips or advice do you have for your ARP-AIRE fellow grantees? Are there things that you found helpful? Were there resources that were useful? I know a lot of times success in this area stems from having existing good working relationships with your local education agencies, your schools, your districts, and the leadership there. And maybe you even have some thoughts on what helped to grow that kind of a relationship that allowed you to move forward.
I'd like to speak, Tracy. This is Scott from the Crook Tribe.
Please, thank you.
We had existing MOUs in place from working with schools in the past, and we are getting our data sharing agreements more detailed, so they're not so vague, because it was just kind of this working relationship where they've agreed to let us share the data or interact in their areas or whatever service or computer system they have set up. But it's really the relationship that you establish with the schools, being organized, being reliable, and gaining that trust with administration, teachers. That's, I believe, the best way to go about it.
Thank you. That trust is a big
And showing them what you're doing and why you need this information or this data, and how it serves our population and then the community as well. So,
do you have an example of that, Scott?
Well, I think if Melissa Blackington is on. I can't see her. She's with
I'm on.
Could you give an example of this, Melissa? Because you are new and you've had to deal with your data collection and with the new high school, new middle schools, and just give a little bit of your background with this, please.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily know that I have a specific example to that, but I can speak to the relationship building piece of it being sort of critical to them opening up for data. So with the high school here in Wairika, they haven't had a lot of consistent involvement from whoever has been in my position before. So there hasn't been a lot of trust built. They do have some maybe opinions about a level of disorganization that they weren't comfortable working with. So it was really just a matter of being consistent, showing up when I said I was going to be showing up. And I think it's probably the same for Roseanne in the middle schools. She shows up every day. She works with those students every day. She's in constant communication with the administrators every day. And I think, just having them be able to see that we are going to follow through with what we say we're going to do. And then when we can show them the reports that say, you know, when we're asking them for areas access, or when we're asking them for information about their student population, you know, this is our overlapping population, and this is how your cooperation with what we've done has allowed us to, you know, spend this money appropriately. And now we've got more tutors, and here their grades have improved significantly, or things along those lines. Is that helpful?
Yes, I heard a lot of good things there. Consistency, reliability, as key factors to building that trust. Anybody like to add to that or expand on that?
This is Dylan with the Allied Community of St. Paul Tribal Government. Hi, Tracy. Yeah, I think those are really good points. Given the timeline for when the MOUs or those agreements were due, it would have been difficult to do that from a cold start. So I think having those agreements in place is really key leading into these projects. The most arduous point of that was not the data sharing, but rather a FERPA agreement that we negotiated with our college partners. So that's Illisavic College up in Ukqiavik, Alaska. And that was a fairly arduous task for us, just because there's a lot of extension of trust there. I would echo what I think Melissa and Scott both outlined, which is that it's really that relationship building that occurs over time that allows those conversations to be had. In addition to that, one thing that I think would benefit other grantees in understanding is just that there are some pretty specific requirements related to FERPA and data sharing in general. But there's also some institutional training that exists both in local LEAs and, you know, if you have a college partner in the collegiate level as well. And so one approach that helped us was that we initiated those trainings ahead of the process for getting the agreements in place. And I think that telegraphed to our partners that not only were we serious about what we were doing, but we were also training to their level of standard. And that helped to kind of transition into making a case for why we're an appropriate body to handle kind of that data and that student data and maintain those standards. So I guess that's what helped us. The other thing that I would say that helped us in our agreements, most of our agreements were built on existing MOAs or agreements with our LEA. That said, though, going into this project, knowing that the data sharing piece was a sensitive subject, our tribal council president engaged directly with the school board, as did our executive team. And that was also helpful because it got a very high level conversation started about the relationship between the two entities. And I think that helped us to kind of nudge the school district, which had, you know, historically been somewhat antithetical to a tribe, and increased involvement in their process, become a little more familiar to what our perspective was and maybe get encouraged to that. So I just wanted to share those two things in the sense that they benefited our process and maybe help others.
Thank you. I think that's a really helpful suggestion, you know, engage with collaboration between the tribe and the school board. And I'm curious, the training that you mentioned, was that like an external training for program for the ARP-AIRE program staff, or was this training that you provided to the school district?
No, this was training that the school district provides to its facilitators. So its administrators receive kind of a FERPA training, and Illisavic has a variant of that as well. So what we did was we requested that we receive their training. That way it's meeting, you know, in the case of the LEA, the state standards, but in the case of Illisavic, it was kind of a collegiate level national standard. Either way, though, that way it would be same as opposed to our version of it. And that wasn't done through this project specifically. The funding for that, or how we went about that, was provided through our relationship with them prior to this. But regardless, I think it did help the conversation. And I think if you need a starting point to kind of demonstrate how and in what way that your program or your staff are competent to be able to maintain those standards, initiating those trainings, I think, is one way to get there.
Love that example of collaboration. Thank you for sharing those successes and tips. How about the other side of the coin now? What challenges are you experiencing that still need solutions? Those of you who are still working on your data sharing agreements. We have a collection of experienced individuals and individuals with a lot of varied experiences here on our talking circle. So we'd love to be able to share and learn from each other. If you have challenges that you're still grappling with or still looking for solutions in terms of these data sharing agreements.
Just to break the silence, we currently don't have any. I mean, we've got our data sharing agreement in place, but I can speak to the process before that. I know a difficult thing from my perspective was getting buy-in from our tribal leaders for a lot of things and creating MOUs with schools. Like, it has to be making sure that you are clear about, what data is being shared, what we expect, having those things written down, and being able to explain, on both ends, to the LEAs, to your tribal leaders. And I'm coming from the perspective of an education department. So that's a big thing that I see. It's not always the schools who are reluctant to go into those agreements. Sometimes it's our higher ups and our tribal leaders, and explaining the need for these things. And of course, sometimes it's easy to say because, well, the grant says we need it, but then also being mindful to, create some kind of draft MOU, or, have something in place so that things can move forward. And working with some of our departments, our tribal departments, has been one way that we've been able to get into the schools. Sometimes they're, we are small staff, so we're not able to go to the school all the time, but we do have other programs who get in there and reach out for other things. So kind of piggybacking off of the things that they do, and introducing ourselves. And in that way was like one way we were able to overcome and get those data agreements in place, those MOUs in place with various schools, actually, different LEAs and higher education institutions.
Thank you, Amber. I think those are some really excellent points. Well, I hope that some of what your colleagues have shared here, in terms of what's worked, or some tips or strategies have resonated with you. If you are still struggling to get these data sharing agreements in place, I'm going to go ahead and take us forward to a polling question in the interest of time here. So thank you all for sharing those insights about data sharing agreements. I think there's some really good nuggets in there. Hopefully be helpful to others. But we're going to expand our area of consideration here for this poll, and thinking more broadly beyond even your data sharing agreements or your MO or your MOUs. We know that many of you are facing implementation challenges with getting your services and activities launched. And so we'd like to hear from you. How would you rank these challenges that are listed? And you should see the poll popping up on your screen right now. If it might be hiding behind something if you don't see it right away, but let us know for each of these challenges. Which of these are the greatest challenges that you're experiencing? And I see we have a rank order question. So you can tell us which of these are the most challenging. And we're starting to get some. So your choices are: is something a significant challenge? Is something somewhat of a challenge? Is it a minimal challenge, or is it not a challenge at all? So I'll give you a few minutes to kind of run through and respond to those challenges. If you have a challenge that's not listed, please do submit your response to any challenges that you may be experiencing that we didn't think of and we did not include on the list. all this information is really intended to help us better understand your needs so that we can bring to you resources, experiences, discussions that'll be most helpful. So it looks like I have about 7 or 8 responses here. Okay, so let me see what we got. What do we got going on here? It looks like hiring challenges seems to rate either significant or somewhat of a challenge for several of you, for about 9 of you. Lack of qualified staff to deliver services, somewhat or a significant challenge for 6 out of 11 responses. You know, hiring delays is something that we've heard a lot about. Let's see, it looks like we had a number of you rate lack of support from a district or school leadership as somewhat of a challenge. Let's see. See, did I mention, let's see, qualified staff. Looks like we have, yeah, 6 folks there. Last chance if you haven't responded. Somewhat. And if there's other questions, if there's other challenges not listed, please feel free to list those. So let's reflect on some of the answers now. So hiring challenges, lack of qualified staff, lack of support from the district or school leadership tends to seem to be at the top ranked challenges. What kinds of resources or supports, if you were to imagine, like what would be most helpful to overcoming those, whether that's hiring, whether it's identifying qualified staff or training up staff, or lack of support from the district? What would be helpful to address those challenges? What kinds of resources or supports?
I will chime in and say, for the, I guess, lack of, was it educated staff or?
Yeah, it was lack of qualified staff to deliver services.
Okay, and I think that could be addressed by getting them services, trainings, connecting them with, I don't know, some ways of informing them how to provide those services, offering examples, leadership in that way. And then another thing for the school district, so with getting their support, I found that working with some of the Indian education departments, GOM, people who are invested in the community and want to see change, things like that, and getting the buy-in from them as well, and trying to support your efforts that way.
Okay. Anybody else want to piggyback on that or expand on that? Are there well, I'll let people respond. Does anyone have examples of maybe they've used some of those strategies, whether that's providing training to staff or helping them to learn about different service modalities and ways to provide services?
I'll go ahead again. Not particularly for this program. I oversee some of the programs, but then one, we had a team meeting and discussed some things about working styles. And then I brought in someone from one of our vocational schoolings, and we created some courses for the community. And I just asked my team, if y'all are available, come. And luckily everyone came, and it was about learning, how you work within a system, and looking at those strengths of everyone. It helped to identify different personalities, different working styles, and ways in which we can, either be better, or areas where we might find someone difficult to work with, or but seeing, from their perspective. So I think that was a big thing for us when we talk about, our teams and I guess employees that we think are not, sufficient enough to carry out some of these. I think helping and identifying working styles and understanding each other was a big way in which we're trying to move forward, as opposed to saying someone can't do something. We try to equip them with the tools where they can.
I can appreciate that asset-based approach to and doing even like knowing the strengths of the team, not only work styles, but maybe even skills or certifications that we might not even be aware of, that we'd be able to tap into existing staff and really put them in the positions where they're able to shine. Sarah, did you want to add something or pose a question?
Oh, this is Melissa with the Karuk tribe. I had actually had a couple of questions, and actually maybe even that Amber might further elaborate on. So we're a super rural area. I'm guessing we're not alone in that. And part of our service area is really, really isolated. So they're, at least a couple of hours from sort of any other major communities, and major communities still being very rural communities. So I think one of our struggles in as far as lack of qualified staff to deliver services is actually just, finding people who can actually do the work. And then to Amber's point, who are interested in kind of collaborating on what skills do we all bring to the table, and how can we really utilize everybody's individual skills. So I'm really curious to kind of hear other people's perspectives in rural and isolated areas, how they sort of combat this lack of qualified staff, from perspectives other than just training.
You are right, Melissa. You are not the only one grantee that works in a rural or remote setting. And maybe that's something, if anybody has something, an example that they want to share here today, that we'd love to hear about it. In terms of resources and supports, maybe this is something that we can dive into further in another talking circle session. Exactly that question that you're lifting up.
Yeah, that would be great. Amber, I was really compelled by some of the things that you sort of just said, and I really like the idea of really getting to know everybody's personal skills and what they bring to the table, and how to utilize everybody's individual skills on a full team basis. And I personally would wonder if you might speak a little bit more to that, and if, like, maybe how you arrange that, and how successful was it with your team, and were people pretty open to it, that kind of thing, if you're open to talking about it.
Yeah, for sure. So the reason behind like all these, I've created or worked with this vocational school to bring in classes every month, like almost weekly from June to September is what we have them set up for. And through some of our granting, it has to be Wichita tribal members. I'm with the Wichita affiliated tribes, but just thinking outside the box, we was able to offer it to the community. And with that, I was thinking about things that we need within the workplace. Yes, people need to know how to work computers. They need to, do their email, Excel, Microsoft, Adobe, all these things like that. But then there's also, I think, these ideas and definition about what qualified people are, or successful people are, or good employees. Like those, to me, it's like redefining those definitions of how we see the people that we work with. I don't think, just thinking about our kids in that perspective of we, trying to assist them because we know that they have other issues outside of being a student. I mean, some of them are being raised by grandparents. They come in from homes that have drug, alcoholism. We all have this generational trauma. And if you're dealing with Indigenous kids, so in that same respect, you got to think about the people that you're working with. If they are tribal, or even if they're not tribal, we all come from different backgrounds. We all have different cultures. We all have different ideas about working styles and all that. So I incorporated some classes that kind of speak on leadership, kind of speak on, who we are, because I think that's a big part of coming together as people, is understanding each other's differences and then working on those things to make us stronger together. And if we're able to, as because I sit in this leadership position, but I try to, talk to my people on the same level where it's like, I'm not your boss. I don't, like a certain language and terminology, but I want you to know who I am. I want you to know my faults. I'm not perfect at this. This is how I get sometimes. And this is how I'm working on it, and opening that space for them to kind of share as well has been helpful. We just got a new program under us, and the working style of my director is like very different from mine. But having these conversations and being able to share with each other was a big part of moving forward. I can't speak to say like if it's actually had a major and drastic effect, but I think now we all kind of understand each other. And we just kind of keep working on it as we go. And I can send you the information. There's like a website where you could, do your 5 voices is what they was using. I mean, it's all free, and it might be something that you could look into, and maybe finding something that if it's of interest to you, you could use it, or finding something similar to kind of start from. But I just think it's a good starting point and a good base point, because sometimes we can't find people in our communities. There's only 3 of us in my department, and we spread ourselves thin, but we understand where our vision is and what our goals are and what we want to do for the community. And so with us 3, we're able to do a lot.
That really resonates with me, and I would love it if you would, can you put that website in the chat or anything like that? Would that be reasonable?
Yeah. Let me find it on my email. I'll just throw it
Awesome.
in there.
Thank you so much.
Sorry for taking everyone's time. You're welcome.
Yeah, this is great. This is great sharing. This is what we want to use this time for, to share, what's working for you, what approaches are you taking, because it might be a big idea, it might be a really small idea that helps move somebody forward. So I really appreciate your willingness to jump in and share. One thing I'm taking away from our conversation today is that we may want to do some more of this in this area around, how are we finding or cultivating qualified staff, particularly in these remote areas that we all work in. So we're almost to the top of our last end of our time together now. I did just want to put this slide in front of you all now. You've seen a different version of this. We've updated this now with the names of our program, of our different grantees who are implementing the various activities and services that you were able to offer underneath this grant. So we will share this again at an upcoming talking circle. And in the meantime, I just wanted to give you one last opportunity to ask any questions that you may have that we didn't get to already. If you have anything that's a burning question, now would be a good time. You can pop it into the chat box for us. Anybody with a hand up? Any burning questions? All right, I know we shared some due dates. Like I said, we will share this out with this, the slide deck out with you, so you have that. A few resources and a few heads up reminders before we say goodbye. We remember that as a project director, you and your staff members who attended the project directors meeting virtually this year, you do still have access to that, and you will for the until next year. So feel free to go in there and revisit any session recordings. Maybe you want to, what was that thing that was shared in the session I attended, or maybe what happened in that session that I really wanted to go to but wasn't able to get to. You can revisit that. Also on our OIE Technical Assistance YouTube channel, you can view the recording of the 50th anniversary celebration of OIE. You might be particularly interested in the chapters around the student artist competition winners. There's also some really interesting testimonials under the student testimonial recognition. So just an encouragement there to check those up. You may have received a notice to complete a survey from the Office of Management and Budget. This survey goes out to everybody who attended any technical assistance event that we hosted over the grant year. We really encourage everybody to respond to that. We want a really high response rate. This is information that you provide to us that will help OIE and your technical assistance team to really provide that useful and most relevant support. I promise it's short. It won't take too much time from your day. So if you see that, please do respond to it. If you didn't see it, you may want to check your spam folder. Sometimes those things do land in there. So if you wouldn't mind, please go ahead and take a look for that. Encourage your team members and other staff members to complete that as well. Upcoming dates are our standing office hours, which is the fourth Thursday of every month from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern, will be August 25th. Good time to get some FaceTime with your program officer, get any questions answered, drop in and out as needed for those office hours. Our talking circle dates will be announced as soon as we're able to lock those in for you. We'll make sure that those notices go out to everybody. And just a quick plug too, that if you have staff members that you want to be included in that distribution list, you can send their contact information to your technical assistance team. You can always reach us at oie@seiservices.com. We'll make sure to add those people to our distribution list so that they can also be included in those talking circles and or office hour events. We're going to put up a quick end of session poll that we always like to do. This is your opportunity to tell us what was useful about today's session and what you'd like to see more of. So please do take a minute before saying goodbye to respond to that. You should see that poll up on your screen now. Just a really quick poll. And I know we're at the top of the hour, and if you have to jump, we just ask that you complete the poll before you go. But I do want to take a minute now, if you are able, to share a resource that we have put together for the ARP-AIRE grantee cohort. Sarah, did you want to add anything?
No, take it away to the.
Okay. Sorry, I just want to make sure you had an opportunity to say anything in case people had to jump. All right, so what you guys are seeing on my screen right now is a Padlet, and some of you may have used Padlet. You've seen us use them in some of our technical assistance sessions, or maybe you use them in some of your grant activities or other work. But what we've done is we've compiled what we hope to be sort of a one-stop shop for some resources and links for you. This is a resource that you can come into. You can click on these links, you can post questions, you can share documents. So let me just take a couple of minutes and tell you what we got here. To the far left, we have two columns really. Where you can find upcoming deadlines and events. You'll see that I've listed here some of those deadlines that we talked about earlier today for your APR updates as well as your budget revisions. We've got talking circle dates. Today is listed. When we get the new dates, we'll put those up here as well. And then upcoming office hours. Under forms and templates, we have as well some of the documents that we shared with you here today, but if you didn't grab them off the chat box, we'll share this link there. It's already in the chat box there. If you want to join me in the Padlet right this minute, you can do that, but go ahead and bookmark that at least, even if you don't come here and check it out today, you can come back later. We have the APR update form for you. You can grab that there, as well as the directions about where to email that and by when. We have when the optional budget revision form is finalized, we will post that here so that you can have that by your January 12th deadline. We've also included that Section C reporting tool. And this one way down here at the bottom too, we didn't talk about it today, but we have mentioned in the past, that you have the ability to get view only access to the drawdown activity in G5. This can be really super helpful in preparing those performance reports and monitoring activity there. That form and the directions is right there for you to grab. We have some links that are just, if you don't already have them bookmarked, we have them ready for you here. And then really a couple of different ways that you can use this tool to interact with each other. So this first one here with the lavender or purple colored boxes here, you see we've created a post for every single ARP-AIRE grantee underneath this column, program web pages and social media. So if you have a program page, a link to that, you can come to your post. You can just click on add a comment here and you can add your information or link, and then you'll see this little arrow there. That's how you post it. And people can take a look at your program websites, or if you have a Facebook page or a Twitter page or anything, you can put those here. Everyone's interested in what their fellow grantees are doing. So that's one way that you can share. The other way is with these three columns over here. You'll see that we have one for topics for upcoming talking circles. If you want to make a post or a suggestion, you can click the little plus sign down here. You can put in a subject and the body of your comment, and then publish that right up here so that we'll keep an eye on this. If you have ideas, things that you want to talk more deeply about in upcoming talking circles, we'd love for you to let us know. Other questions and comments, maybe it doesn't fit nicely in one of these other columns, you can add those there. We talked about data sharing agreements here, and if you are willing and able, and we know sometimes it's not something that's shareable, but if you're willing and able, we dedicated a column to grantee examples of data sharing agreements. I've included here the sample data sharing agreement that was shared in October, I think, during our data sharing agreement webinar. So we already have one example. If you need an example, you can grab that. But if you have some and you would like to share them with your colleagues, the way you do that is, again, just down at the bottom of the column, you're going to click that little plus sign, and then you see these little icons in here. In addition to writing a subject line and then the text of your post, you can also click to upload a document. So if you click on that, then you can go to your different files and folders and choose a document to upload, and it'll make it, and then you publish it. Always make sure to publish it, and it'll appear just as my document has right here. So you have that link there in the chat to come visit this Padlet. We're going to maintain this, keep it updated, and we really want to encourage you to use it as well. You know, not just with us to communicate with us, but also with each other. So thank you for, if you're still with us, I thank you for hanging around and listening to that. We'll of course reference this in future talking circles and technical assistance sessions as well. All right, and thank you, those of you who have responded to our end of session poll. It is still up. If you haven't yet submitted your responses, we welcome your input. And thank you for your time, and I hope you have a wonderful, safe, and productive day.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.